What I'm going to do now is head back to our examples and take you to two Roma communities. So the first one is a community called Piraeus in Greece. And as I'm talking, the images of this community will come past you. So this is a community which has been built in a rubbish tip, a rubbish dump. And what the community do is the community collects scrap and brings it to the rubbish dump for recycling, but they actually live in the rubbish dump. There's no water. The electricity is kind of stolen. I think in the background in this particular image, you can see a power pole on the back. So they've connected their electricity up to a power pole. And you can see there a truck where they've gone around collecting rubbish. I mean, one of the questions is, Greeks think that this is all stolen. Maybe it's not. Maybe they paid a few euros for it, but this is where the folks live. And this is an example here of a piece of housing, which is basically something makeshift, which is made from the stuff that's been found. So we went there, and almost none of these students or none of the children in this community go to school or had been going to school until this program. Now some of them go to school. Now, of course, when they go to school, they're regarded as dirty, they're regarded as foreign. They're not. They've been there for a very long time, but the other parents in the school, the Greek parents and the teachers, they're basically often, unfortunately, just simply unwelcome. So the result is the students don't go to school, these push factors and pull factors, which prevent them going to school at all. Now, one small initiative is that as part of the project, the people in the community had decided they would build a little school. You can see here a picture of the school with the word Skolio on there, which is a little makeshift room like the rest of the school. So this is one context in which we were working. And here you can see dimensions of class in terms of poverty. There's a lot of complexity going on in this kind of space. So now we're moving on to a second community called Hagia Sophia. I'm going to go through these slides now one by one, and I'm going to point some things out to you. And then the classic cliches about Roma is their watermelon sellers. Here they are. There's a truck full of watermelons. They're kind of traveling salespeople who sell things on the road. And looking down the street here, you can see, again, this is a different community. It's got a street and it's got a fence. Here you can see a little church in the front, which indicates they're Greek Orthodox, like many other Greeks are as well. Here's a group of boys clowning around. And here's a house. Now, you can see this is a really substantial house. This was a former social housing place with little concrete houses. This is somebody who's hugely expanded their house. There is a pickup truck with a pile of 50 euro notes thrown over the dashboard. So these people are in a different kind of business to the people in the rubbish tip. And you can guess what the business might be. How do you end up with a pile of cash, which is just simply casually thrown around like that? So these are just two little insights into two communities, which are in fact very, very different on many, many dimensions. So yes, it's generic in the sense that it falls under the category of Roma and Roma education. That's what we're looking at. But these two communities are very, very different in their degree of affluence. The patterns of marginality are different, and so on. So let me go through the Roma example now, and let me look at all those classic categorical differences. Firstly, social class. In fact, there's a huge amount of variety. Some Roma live in cities, they're reasonably affluent. Just those two communities we looked at are actually very, very different, although they're very marginal. The kind of business they do and the economic resources they have around them are different. Their locale's different. One was in a rubbish tip, one had a street, the second one actually did have a little school that was nearby, which the students actually went to. I don't know whether family structures were different, but we know that family structures within any one group vary a huge amount between one type of family and another. Commonly with Roma, it's large extended families, but it's not always the case by any stretch of the imagination. Age, okay, is age, but race is an interesting one. You might see in these pictures that these kids have darker skin than Greeks do, although there's a lot of variety. But when you go to Ireland and to England, the Roma, who normally speak the same language, are indistinguishable from other white people in Ireland or England, where they're called travellers, by the way. So there's no consistency about the way Roma look, they can't really be classified as a race. And by the way, across Europe, there are 10 million Roma. So it's a significant ethnic minority which can be found all the way across Europe from Greece all the way through to Ireland. Sex and sexuality, there are a number of practices which kind of get Roma into trouble. One is underage marriage. There's the word Roma means man. This is not really about sex. It's actually one of these genre issues. So, there may be a whole lot of inherent sexism in these communities, but I'm sure it varies an awful lot. Physical and mental abilities, okay, there's a panoply of those things, and the teachers in the school and the people in our project were dealing with that. Language is really interesting, to be quite frank. So yes, the dictionary told us there's this language called Romany, and there's this language called Romany. So the interesting thing is ethnolinguists have said that the nearest related languages, come from the Punjab in India, which kind of points to the fact that this group may have come from India about 1,000 years ago, but there's no self-understanding of that amongst the group. And also the language is incredibly mixed with local languages. And in fact, if you go to Ethnologue, which is the definitive web coding site for coding languages and for classifying languages and then being able to code them in web context, there's I don't know how many different Rom dialects which are actually classified as different languages. It's really complicated, and these folk in Greece, they're also kind of simultaneously native Greek speakers as well, because they grew up in Greece. And likewise, travellers, some travellers in England and Ireland don't speak Romany, and when they do, they speak English without an accent. It's complicated. As for ethnic identity, it's incredibly complicated what people relate to, and cultural practices. They're very, very varied. Communities of commitment, in some parts of Europe, Rom are Christians. In some, they're Muslims. In Greece, they happen to be Greek Orthodox, and so on. So if you take any of these categories and you start dealing with Rom as a group, it's incredibly complicated, is the kind of point that I'm trying to make. So what's been the Roma experience in history? Well, the answer is a lot of exclusion. And in fact, today they're being excluded by the fact that the school basically doesn't want them, right? They're being excluded by structures of poverty. They're being excluded by the fact that they're regarded as criminals. They're stealing, are they selling scrap metal, or has it been stolen? For one of those communities, or the other community, where did that money come from? So that exclusion happens today, but historically the exclusion has been vicious and awful. The worst moment probably, there have been many, many pogroms over the years. One of the often unnoticed aspects of the German Holocaust is the fact that 500,000 gypsies were killed in concentration camps. So the Nazis weren't just targeting Jews. They targeted a lot of other groups, homosexuals, communists, but around this ethnic descriptor or racial descriptor, they specifically targeted gypsies. There have also been attempts at assimilation, attempts to force gypsies into encampments. So, in fact, the housing settlement that you saw in the second of those communities in Hagia Sophia is an example of an attempt to assimilate, to bring, put them in a regular situation with regular housing, social housing, and so on. Many attempts to assimilate. There have also been attempts at inclusion. An interesting paradox is that even during the horrors of the Stalin period, there was the beginnings of a gypsy theatre in Moscow. There was gypsy language teaching. There was recognition of gypsies as an ethnic community during the Stalin period. Funny paradox, by the way, is Stalin was a Georgian, not a Russian, and he made his way up through the Bolshevik Party by being, I'll use modern terminology even though it's anachronistic, I'll say he was the Minister for Multiculturalism. He actually dealt with ethnic minorities and kind of dealt with them pretty successfully. And one of the ways to deal with ethnic minorities is to recognise the difference and to value it. So, as I say, ironically, that happened during the Nazi period. It also happened in communist Yugoslavia. And now with the European Union, The project we were part of was explicitly a project aimed at fostering inclusion for Roma. So this is explicitly a policy now of the European Union.